Hello and welcome to Autumn 2 Week 3 exam, which is on respiration and metabolism. In case you didn't know, you need your blue pen with you for making annotations and your green pen for marking and making corrections. Right, let's get started. Question 1 says, respiration can happen aerobically or anaerobically. And these are two terms we're going to come across a lot as we're doing an exam on respiration. Aerobically, remember, means with oxygen. Anaerobically means without oxygen. It says respiration transfers energy from glucose. Draw one line from each type of respiration in human cells to the correct information. Okay, aerobic respiration, we've already annotated, means with oxygen, so it's going to use oxygen as it reacts with the glucose. Anaerobic respiration, I've written the formula for here, where we're reacting glucose in our cells to produce lactic acid and to release energy. So anaerobic respiration produces lactic acid. 1 mark for each of those lines there. 1b. The table below shows the amount of energy released by aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Okay, so let's have a look at this table. We've got both types of respiration, and here it's shown us the energy in kilojoules transferred from just 1 gram of glucose. And we can see straight away there's a lot more energy released from aerobic respiration than in anaerobic respiration. So the question is asking us, why might our cells respire anaerobically? Because they release obviously a lot less energy. Well, the reason is that there's either not enough oxygen, or we could say that more energy is required when we're exercising. So when we're carrying out exercise, that's when there's going to be not enough oxygen, so we'll be carrying out anaerobic respiration. Okay. 1c. Yeast is used in the brewing and baking industries. Okay, so we're thinking about anaerobic respiration previously, and now we're talking about yeast. Now, anaerobic respiration in yeast is called fermentation, and I've written the word equation here for fermentation, where again we're reacting glucose without oxygen to produce ethanol, carbon dioxide, and it also releases some energy. Why is yeast used in these industries, in the brewing and the baking industries, we'll ask you. So, your first mark is if you tell me that yeast produces carbon dioxide. However, we need to say why is that useful in brewing and baking? Because carbon dioxide can make bread rise, it produces little bubbles in bread, making your bread rise from that dough, and it can also make alcoholic drinks fizzy as well. So the little bubbles in alcoholic drinks are carbon dioxide. Yeast also produces ethanol, and ethanol is the alcohol in alcoholic drinks. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 marks there, 4-mark question. Question 2. Some students investigated how exercise affects heart rate. The figure below shows their results. So here we've got 2 students, we've got the time on the x-axis and the heart rates in beats per minute on the y-axis. And we can see the heart rate is staying constant, then it's increasing, decreasing, and then staying constant again at the end. What was student B's resting heart rate? So that's your heart rate, probably right now as you're sitting down at your desk. That was 66 beats per minute. We can see it here on the graph, this line here, where we're not exercising, the heart rate is staying nice and constant as they're just resting. I can see between 60 and 70, each little box is worth 2. So 62, 64, 66 beats per minute. If you just wrote 66 without the units of measurement, you can still have the mark. The students started running at 2 minutes, and I've labelled on my graph there, that's when they started running, that's when the exercise began at 2 minutes here. What evidence for this is in the figure above. So if we have a look at the figure above, they're telling us that they start exercising at 2 minutes, and we can see here their heart rate is increasing as they start to exercise. Okay, that's obvious. As we start to exercise, our heart starts to beat faster. So heart rate increasing is for just our 1 mark. Okay, next question. Let's have a look. 2c. For how many minutes did the students run? So we've already said that where these lines are flat, we've got the resting heart rate as they're resting. However, we have lots of points where the heart rate is higher than that. Now, it's very tempting to think that the whole time your heart rate is raised, you're exercising. However, if we have a look here, the heart rate is going up, it's increasing, and it starts to come down again. And we're thinking logically about what's happening here. As soon as you stop exercising, your heart rate starts to go down. However, it doesn't immediately go down to your resting heart rate. So, at the peak here is where the exercise ends, and I've labelled that on there. So at 6 minutes, exercise is ending. So exercise began at 2 minutes, ended at 6 minutes. So how many minutes did the students run? 6 minus 2 is 4 minutes. 1 mark for that tick. There are other changes in the body during exercise. So if we think about other changes, we've already spoken about the heart rate, so I just made myself a little note just to know I'm not going to talk about the heart rate in this question. Explain why these changes occur. So think about during exercise, what other changes are occurring in our body. Some changes you could have written down. You could have said the breathing rate increases. You breathe a lot deeper, so you're taking in more air. You could have said for that point the breathing volume increases. You could say your body temperature increases, or that sweating occurs. So there are any of the changes that you could have said. I'm going to tell you in a moment exactly how you get your marks. Now the reasons why this happens, well, one is to increase that the rate of gas exchange, so to provide more oxygen or to remove carbon dioxide faster from your body. By providing more oxygen, you increase the rate of respiration happens. By increasing the rate of respiration, you release more energy into your cells, and that energy is used for movement, or we could say muscle contraction. You get 4 marks if you've said 2 of these points about ways in which your body is changing during exercise, and 2 of these explanation points as well for your 4 marks there. Okay, let's have a look. 3A. Use the box to complete the equation for aerobic respiration. Remember, we see that word aerobic, we're thinking with oxygen. So we've got alcohol, glucose, lactic acid, or water that we could put in our box here. So our word equation is glucose plus oxygen produces carbon dioxide plus water and also releases energy in brackets. 1 mark for each of those. Some students investigated the effect of temperature on the rate of aerobic respiration in earthworms. So again, I'm thinking aerobic, I'm thinking with oxygen, so I've just written O2 there. As this is going to be a question about a practical, I'm always thinking about, it's a good habit to get into, what is my independent variable, what am I changing, what is my dependent. So I've written here the effect of the temperature, so temperature is the independent variable, we're going to change the temperature, and we're going to measure the rate of aerobic respiration. And the diagram below shows the apparatus the student used. When the tap is closed, it's telling us the bead of liquid moves to the left as the earthworms take in oxygen. So let's have a look here. Here is the tap, so this is where the air would be able to get in to get to the earthworms. If we've closed the tap, no air will be able to enter. I'm thinking in the air we're going to have oxygen, so no oxygen is going to be able to get in here. Here's the bead they're talking about. That bead is going to move to the left when the tap is closed. This is because the earthworms are taking in oxygen for aerobic respiration. Okay, so no more air can get in. They're taking in that oxygen, carrying out aerobic respiration in their cells, and any carbon dioxide that they produced is going to be absorbed down here. So we're going to see the amount of gas in that test tube is going to decrease, and as the volume of gas in that test tube decreases, that bead is going to move along there, just to show that happening. The question is asking us, the students put the test tube into a water bath at 20 degrees Celsius for 10 minutes. They left the tap open during this time, so they haven't closed it yet. Air can still get in. They're just putting the test tube in a water bath at 20 degrees C. Why did the students put the test tube in the water bath at 20 degrees C for 10 minutes? Tick 1 box. Remember, our independent variable is we're looking at the effect of temperature, so that's what they're trying to change, the temperature of the earthworms and how that's going to affect the rate of aerobic respiration. Now we look at these first two, air containing more oxygen at 20 degrees Celsius or containing less oxygen at 20 degrees Celsius. There's going to be a very small amount of change in the gases as temperature changes, but not significant at all. But the earthworm's body temperature will have a large effect on the rate of aerobic respiration. So that is our tick there. Okay, the students then closed the tap, started the stopwatch, recorded the position of the bead of liquid every 2 minutes. So every 2 minutes on the stopwatch is going 2 minutes, and they're going to measure where this little bead has got to along here. And then they repeated the experiment at 10 degrees Celsius as well. So remember, that was our independent variable, so they've changed the temperature now down to 10 degrees Celsius. The graph shows the students' results. Okay, let's have a look here. So we've got the time in minutes on the x-axis, the position of the bead of liquid on the scale on the y-axis, and we can see we've got two data sets. We've got points plotted every 2 minutes for 20 degrees Celsius and 10 degrees Celsius. 3BI is asking us how much oxygen did the earthworms take in during the 10 minutes at 20 degrees Celsius. So I'm looking at my 20 degrees Celsius line. Here, if I read across, it says 60. However, it's very easy just to write 60 as our answer, but that's not correct because the original bead was originally at 5 millimeters cubed. Okay, so it's gone from 5 to 60. So if I do 60 minus 5, it tells me 55. Now down here is a little bit tricky to read off, so they give you 1 mark either way. Okay, so you could have said 56 or 54 for that question. 2 marks for that, 1 mark for showing you're working out, doing 60 minus 5, 1 mark for your correct answer. 3BII. The earthworms took in this volume of oxygen in 10 minutes. Use your answer from the previous question to calculate how much oxygen the earthworms took in each minute. So this is for 10 minutes, they want to know for each minute, so we're simply going to do our answer divided by 10. So for me it was 55 divided by 10 equals 5.5. Perhaps you got 56 divided by 10, that would be 5.6. If you got this answer completely wrong, but you still correctly divided it by 10, you can still have your 1 mark. (3C). When drawing the line on the graph for the experiment at 10 degrees Celsius, the students ignored the reading at 8 minutes. Let's have a look at that. So 10 degrees Celsius, 8 minutes, you see they've drawn their line of best fit and they've ignored the poor little data point there. Suggest why they ignored the reading at 8 minutes. Have a look at it again. Why might they ignore that? Well, we can see all these other points are in line with each other, in line with the pattern, and this one is sticking out by itself. So we can call that an anomalous result. So you could say it's an anomaly, or we could just say it does not fit the pattern, does not fit the trend. 3CII. One student suggested that they should repeat the experiment twice more at each temperature. Remember, they only took those measurements at 20 degrees Celsius once and at 10 degrees Celsius once. How would repeating the experiment improve the investigation? So by repeating the experiment, we can say it makes the data more reliable. It means I can trust it more. I can be sure that my conclusions that I draw from it are more reliable. We could also say to check the repeatability. So repeatability is if you do the experiment again and you get the same results or similar results, then you can say is repeatable. You could also say to help identify the anomalies. So just to check, if I get that point sticking out every single time, it wouldn't be an anomaly, but just that one time it was sticking out, that tells me something's gone wrong in my practical. That's an anomaly. Question 4. An athlete ran as fast as he could until he was exhausted. Figure 1 shows the concentrations of glucose and of lactic acid in the athlete's blood at the start and at the end of the run. Okay, so let's have a look at these graphs. So we've got the concentration of glucose at the start and at the end, and we can see that it's decreased there. And the amount of lactic acid, the concentration of lactic acid at the start there was very, very little, and at the end much, much higher. Give evidence from figure 1 that the athlete respired anaerobically during the run. Remember, anaerobically means without oxygen. So I'm thinking about that equation that I wrote down back here, where we've got glucose producing lactic acid and energy. So if I'm looking at my graphs here, I can see the lactic acid, lots of it has been produced in the runner's blood. Therefore, I know it ran anaerobically, so my answer I can say there's more lactic acid at the end. (4b). Figure 2 shows the effect of running on the rate of blood flow through the athlete's muscles. Let's have a look here. So we can see the rate of blood flow on the y-axis, the time in minutes on the x-axis. Remember, the rate of blood flow is the amount of blood flowing through your blood vessels per minute. For how many minutes did the athlete run? Okay, so I can see here we've got a constant amount of blood flowing through his vessels at this point, and then suddenly it starts to increase. So that indicates to me that's when his run begins. Then it's slowly going to increase and it levels off, but at this point I've still got quite a high amount of blood flowing through the vessels per minute. So at this point I'm thinking he's still carrying out exercise, and then here it starts to decrease, and if it starts to decrease, that tells me that the exercise must be finished and he's starting to recover from that exercise. So we're going to do the 2 minutes minus 0.5 tells me it's 1.5 minutes. Describe what happens to the rate of blood flow through the athlete's muscles during the run. So we've got a describe question here using figure 2, using the data from that in our answer. So you get 1 mark from this 2-mark question for just describing what happens. We're saying it increases at first and levels off. We get no marks for talking about this part of the graph or this part of the graph because it's asking us about during the run. So just this section of the graph here. So it increases at first and then it levels off. You get your 2nd mark if you use some sensible pieces of data to back up your point. So for example, you could say that it increases up until about 1.5 minutes and then levels off, or you could say it increases up to 10 decimeters cubed per minute and then levels off. So using data as well as that first point for both of our marks on that question. Okay, last question. 4b III. Explain how the change in blood flow to the athlete's muscles helps him to run. So I'm thinking about my blood. It transports 2 really key things I'm interested in at the moment. It transports oxygen in my red blood cells. I've just written that as RBC, red blood cells. Also transports glucose in the plasma. So as we're changing the blood flow, how quickly that blood flows through his vessels, that's going to help him to run, and that's what I want to explain. So 2 points. If we're increasing the blood flow, we're going to be supplying more oxygen to our cells and more glucose. By doing that, there'll be more respiration, or a higher rate of respiration, I can say. And that in turn releases more energy, which is going to help our runner to be able to run the race. Okay? To get all 4 marks, you need to have at least once said the word more or increase, to imply that as the blood flow increases, we're getting more oxygen or more glucose or more respiration or more energy. As long as you've said that once, you can have all 4 of your marks for these 4 points. Remember, now you've marked it, give yourself a mark out of 30 and write that on the front in this box.